This is Roger Stone for American Sovereign Bullion. Since 2020, the U.S. dollar has lost over 20% of its purchasing power. Meanwhile, gold continues to rise. Call 844-272-2428 or go to asbgold.com now to get your free gold and silver guide and learn how to protect your wealth with physical gold and silver delivered to your door or held in a gold IRA today. So go to asbgold.com now. Don't wait for the markets to drop. That's asbgold.com.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Hey, Roger Stone has the night off. I'm James Flippin, sitting in. And if you're listening in the New York City area, you may recognize the voice. I'm the news guy, often heard this hour for our affiliate in the Big Apple. It is the Stone Zone with James Flippin on what's one of the most tragic and heartbreaking days for all Americans every year, April 15th. And I'm not actually being flippant or trying to be downplaying of the anniversary of the Boston bombing, the Boston Marathon bombing. No, I'm not talking about Boston. I'm talking about all over these United States. But the people of Boston, following the Tea Party once upon a time, they would understand. It's April 15th. The deadline has come and gone in most of our listening areas to send in your taxes.
The taxman's taken all my dough and left me in my stately home, blazing on a sunny afternoon.
The Kinks Sunday, or I should say sunny afternoon. You always get the Beatles and the Taxman, or maybe Johnny Cash after taxes. Wanted to switch it up a little bit for this one. But why is it such a tragic day? Well, obviously nobody wants to give up their hard-earned money. That much anybody would understand. And you don't want to spend more than you have to, and we pay accountants, and we pay executives, and we do everything we can to try to get out from under our tax burden. But the real reason that it's such a tragedy, and the real reason that it's such a bad thing, April 15th, and having to pay your taxes, is because of all the fraud. And that's what we're going to get into in a second here. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says it has been a smooth tax season from the IRS perspective.
Most importantly, it's been a great tax season for the American people. Thanks to promises made, promises kept, through the working families tax cuts, the president has delivered the record refunds to the American people. More than 45% of the filers of the returns that we have seen have had at least one of the four president's signature policies. No tax and tips, no tax and overtime, the deductions for our great seniors, and the deductibility of interest on auto loans for American-made cars.
All good policies, and just this week we had a celebration of no tax on tips at the White House, a DoorDash grandma bringing the McDonald's to the Oval Office. And President Trump's actions, the big beautiful bill, some of the tax cuts that have been put into place, that does make this day a little bit easier to deal with, because President Trump is America first, he's worker first, taxpayer first. And those cuts via the big, beautiful bill are a part of that, delivering on promises, as Treasury Secretary Bessent said there. And really, if not for the Supreme Court sabotaging his tariffs, if not for the war in Iran, where would the stock market be right now? Right? Because, I mean, we know that we went over the 50,000 mark at one point for the Dow. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow stepped back a bit, but the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ Composite advanced. If not for the tariffs decision, if not for the war, we would just be absolutely cooking with gas from an economic perspective. But Iran, a necessary diversion, as Trump has called it. Today, he said he feels as though the war is kind of winding down, and there are some reports out there that both sides could be getting closer to making a protracted peace deal. The Supreme Court, as far as the tariffs thing, less easy to just explain away. I'll say this much. Thanks a lot, John Roberts. Thanks a lot, George W. Bush, for that tariff smackdown. Because don't forget, President Bush, the younger President Bush, spent like a drunken sailor in his second term. He absolutely abandoned the principles of fiscal conservatism. He embraced the neocon big government, but as long as it's our big government, it's fine mindset. And so that inspired the Tea Party, which became MAGA. So I'll say this. Thank you, John Roberts, and thank you, President Bush, for President Trump. But as I said, why really is Tax Day, April 15th, such a tragedy? Well, it's because of where the money that's collected goes, what it's used on, how it's stolen. If it wasn't for all the fraud, we'd probably have a balanced budget. We probably wouldn't have a deficit as a country, or it certainly wouldn't be the trillions and trillions of dollars that it is right now. I know just from a kind of back of the napkin math perspective, because trust me, I'm not a mathematics specialist. And although I studied economics in college, I kind of just barely understand aspects of financial theory. But with all the money that we generate as a country, and the fact that we rank somewhere near the top with, China in the world's best economy, how do we have such a massive deficit? Well, it's because everyone's stealing all the taxpayer money. That's why. Even though you're going to go to jail if you are a couple days late with your taxes, or if you miss a spot and you put the zero here and you don't dot this I and all that, you're going to go to jail, right? I mean, the IRS doesn't mess around. That much we know. Ask Al Capone. But if you steal from the government, somehow that's not held to the same standard. That aspect of it I don't quite get. Although the IRS is sort of single mission, right? They've got the hammer. If you don't pay them by April 15th, they're going to come for you. And don't forget, it's not even just the fraud in terms of the taxpayer spending fraud like we've seen in Minneapolis or California or New York, Illinois, New Jersey, even red states. Florida has had a lot of documented fraud. We'll get there in a second, because it's actually not just these individuals, people like you and me, who set up fake businesses, fake charities, Meals on Wheels, daycare without any kids, all this kind of stuff. That much we know about, right? But what about the actual members of Congress that are also doing this stealing? I mean, even this alleged creep, Eric Swalwell, who made a career out of being anti-Trump, and then at the same time that he was so holier than thou over things like Me Too, he was allegedly assaulting women. Supposedly, this came out today. Got it here in the New York Post. Supposedly, their campaign donors paid for Eric Swalwell's trip to New York City, where he's accused of raping a woman in his hotel room. So this guy was out there bashing President Trump, no doubt talking about at every single turn, the locker room talk, and the video with Billy Bush and whatever had happened or didn't happen with E. Jean Carroll and Stormy Daniels and whatever. I don't have the time or really the care to look up whatever crap he said about Trump over the last few years. But you want to bet that he was playing the house organ about that type of stuff? And still, what does it cost to send a congressman to New York City on a trip for some R&R or whatever he was doing here? Pay for the hotel, pay for the flight, pay for some meals. Okay, you know what? That's small potatoes from a financial perspective, because a trip to New York City costs a lot less than $5 million. And guess what Florida Congresswoman Sheila Cherfalus McCormick is accused of? She's going to go on federal trial next year, and she could be expelled from Congress for allegedly stealing $5 million in FEMA funds for personal use. Now, Miss Cherfalus McCormick, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of her last name, but pretty soon she'll be known by a number in the federal penitentiary system, so who really cares? But her district covers most of the black majority areas in Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, areas where they get hammered by hurricanes, places that really need FEMA. And this woman was using the money for handbags and vacations and spa days. I mean, what an absolute disgrace. What an odious, disgusting, scum of the earth person to do that. To steal from emergency funds. $5 million? $5 million. And that is so brazen. Do you think that we would even know if it was less than, I don't know, $250,000? As if that's not a lot of money. $5 million. Here's Republican Speaker Mike Johnson.
In my view, that would be appropriate there. And she's had all the investigation, and the facts have borne out. Apparently, she has stolen FEMA funds. I mean, think of it. You know, the embezzlement of disaster relief funds by a member of Congress. That deserves expulsion.
Yeah, you think so, Mike? I mean, I got no big beef with Speaker Johnson, honestly. I don't love the laid-back, low-key demeanor. Not my cup of tea, I guess. But hey, yeah, she didn't steal cups and plastic forks and knives from the break room, Mr. Speaker. It was $5 million worth of FEMA funds. So I would say she should be expelled from Congress. Yeah. Congress? How about she should be expelled from the country? She should be exiled. Whatever happened to exile anyway? We need to bring back a good exile. Like Cillian Murphy in the new Batmans when he was the judge. He had been the Scarecrow, and then he becomes the judge. I sentence you to exile. All right, when we come back, talk about a name that's synonymous with fraud. Let's talk Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He is just a fraud on many, many, many levels. And we'll talk about the latest with him that state lawmakers are considering up in Minnesota. I'm James Flippin, in for Roger Stone on the Stone Zone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a very, one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get him his own. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
And I'm James Flippin, filling in for Roger Stone, who has the night off. This is the Stone Zone, talking a lot about the ramifications of Tax Day. April 15th, a heartbreaking and tragic day for anybody who actually has a job and has to fork over that good American money every April 15th. And for a guy like Tim Walz, you have to wonder how much he really cares about the plight of the average taxpayer and how frustrating it must be to see the money that's taken in wasted on things like fraud and like daycare centers in Minneapolis, the whole thing that was exposed by Nick Shirley. By the way, just as an aside, apparently lawmakers in California are considering the Stop Nick Shirley Act. And I can only assume that that's in some way supposed to be getting at citizen journalists or the ability for investigative journalists to do their thing without being, members of the fake news. But Nick Shirley did absolutely expose what was going on in Minnesota, and Tim Walz, according to whistleblowers, knew all about it. So Rep. Mike Weiner, who's a Republican with the Minnesota House of Representatives, he's part of a group of lawmakers who just filed to impeach Tim Walz amid all the overwhelming fraud that's gone down in Minnesota.
Evidence presented in legislative and congressional investigations show that billions in taxpayer funds were lost through fraud in Minnesota social services programs. Oversight systems failed repeatedly under executive leadership. Federal investigation and lawmakers have estimated up to $9 billion in fraud across multiple programs administered by the state. This represents not a minor administrative lapse, but a systematic breakdown in governance.
Yeah, I mean, $9 billion in fraudulent spending. The entire Minnesota state budget. What even is that amount? I'm looking it up here. Minnesota state budget. Spending they had an $18 billion budget surplus as of 2023, which was primarily used to fund a $72 billion two-year state budget. Again, that was back in 2023, the largest in state history. A $72 billion budget. And $9 billion of that was going into some schemers' pockets. So yeah, fraud, major issue. Maybe that's why so many people are anti-taxes. Maybe that's why today, April 15th, is such a heartbreaking and tragic day for so many people, pretty much the opposite of a patriotic day. Because the subtext should be April 15th, the day you pay your taxes, the day you working stiff suckers fork over a third of your legitimately earned money for fraudsters, schemers, fake, phony politicians, grifters, lazy good-for-nothings, ne'er-do-wells. And that's so that we can raise enough revenue to overcome the fraud, keep this great country going, and hopefully, maybe, avoid bankruptcy before the year 2050. But yeah, other than that, what a privilege it is to pay taxes. Raise my taxes, right? That's what all these Democrats, if you talk to Democrats just on like a casual level, they'll say, oh yeah, you could raise my taxes. It's fine. I like having paved roads. I like having, well, they wouldn't say police, but maybe they'd mention the fire or something like that, the fire department. Well, we like having schools. You might as well set the money on fire. You know, that's the thing. Like, if you just said, well, you know, it's all kind of a song and dance, and this is just what we do in the United States, you might as well just set the money on fire. At least that would be something to look at. Here in the tri-state area where I'm broadcasting from today in New York City, this story broke today about SantaCon. Now, if you're not in New York, you might not know about SantaCon, but every December, the March of the Drunken Santas brings together a bunch of people who ostensibly for charity, get drunk and do a bar crawl around either New York City or there's one across the Hudson River in Hoboken as well. And so this guy that founded SantaCon, Stefan Pildes, has been arrested. Why? Well, funny you should ask, because it connects to fraud. Supposedly, he was stealing all the money that was raised for charity and putting it in his own pockets. And I just want to say right now, SantaCon, let's just get rid of it. Okay, with the greasy, smeared Santa suits and the girls and the little mini skirts. All right, fine. Probably a lot of people in our audience are saying, hey, don't complain about that part of it. But it's not exactly in the spirit of the season, is it? SantaCon. And it's just it's just unsightly. It's unseemly. Nobody wants SantaCon. Bar crawls are a personal thing for you and your buddies. You know, maybe when you're like 18, 19, you go check out this SantaCon. It's not worth it. And charity, it's not for charity, okay? This guy, Stefan Pildes, is accused of stealing millions of dollars for SantaCon, and it ain't for charity. He was using it on concert tickets, home renovations, and vacations, and fine dining. So, yeah, ho, 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 all the way to the slammer. I'm James Flippin in for Roger Stone on the Stone Zone. And when we come back, we're going to talk Ticketmaster, Live Nation. That's a monopoly. I'm James Flippin in for Roger Stone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Yeah, you know, we could make fraud the theme of the night. Really. All night. Ticketmaster and Live Nation, even they're doing it. It's all the rage. A Manhattan jury determined that the company, Live Nation, and their subsidiary Ticketmaster, they used monopoly power to take advantage of artists, people who would be going to concerts, venues. It's just one big scheme. Gee, you mean it shouldn't actually cost $750 to see a concert from some no-talent ass clown? I'm shocked. Absolutely shocked. So we'll see what happens with all the class action lawsuits that are soon to come with all these people saying, I'm owed money by Ticketmaster. But you know what? This is really amazing. I saw this on Fox News today. Legal entries into the United States by asylum seekers, they are down 99.9% under President Trump. 99.9% down, asylum seekers. So what do you want to bet that the process of applying for asylum and claiming that you are in so need of special protection from the United States of America, you know what? That's influenced by the perspective of the executive. Yeah. So, of course, it comes down to the actual enforcement and paying for the agents and having the resources in place and all that. No question, right? We know we talked about the big, beautiful bill from a tax cuts perspective. Well, big, beautiful bill also helped fund border security. But it is possible to close the border. Despite the fact that we heard from brain dead Biden, you need legislation to get it done because that's what they pumped them full of vitamin B and said, okay, time for you to go out there and talk about it's impossible to close the border without legislation. Well, maybe in terms of the agents, right? Okay, fine. You can make the case that the big, beautiful bill was needed because at least you could fund the ability to stop all the illegal immigration. But President Trump, the Department of Homeland Security, despite the fake government shutdowns as engineered by the Democrats, Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, getting it done. And that's despite all the fake, ginned up outrage as fueled by the fake news with the Minneapolis and the Renee Good and the Alex Preddy and whoever the scumbag gang member was that got shot during one of those things. They didn't make a big deal about that one. They're like, hey, let's leave that alone. A white woman getting shot and a white guy getting shot. We'll talk about that, but we're not going to talk about the gang member. Let's talk about U.S. Senator Adam Schiff of California. One of the most loathsome, bald-faced, bug-eyed liars I've ever seen. If you want to talk about somebody who's supposedly an important person in a position of authority, right, was a key member of Congress, certainly a surrogate for the left. Now he's one of the 50 U.S. senators. This guy insisted, because let's not forget about this, right? We recently had Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who came forth with a report that laid out all the ways the Russia collusion hoax was engineered from the top, was aimed at eliminating a duly elected president, was aimed at smearing the reputation of an entire political movement, and just kind of deleting history, right? That's what the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, the deep state, Barack Obama, the DNC, whatever term you want to use, the people that were behind the Russiagate collusion attempted to engineer a treason. And you could say they did commit treason. It just didn't really result in what they wanted, which was going to be the impeachment and removal and disgrace of President Trump. It didn't happen because there was no such thing as Russian collusion. But Adam Schiff, every night, he insisted, right? Anybody who would put him on TV and his buggy eyes and his rosy cheeks, every chance they got to put him on screen, he would insist, I've seen it. I've seen the proof. President Trump was colluding with the Russians. He'd seen it. Trust him. Well, that was all a big, fat lie. A treasonous plot that this little twerp probably knew all about. And what did the voters of California do, by the way? Oh, they gave him a promotion. Yeah. Congressman? Nope. Now you're a senator. So on MS Now, I think it was Jen Psaki, I think she was asking this piece of Schiff if he knew about his buddy Eric Swalwell and all the bad stuff he was allegedly up to.
Well, I don't know what others may have known. I can tell you that I certainly didn't know that he was involved in any conduct along the lines of what has come out since Friday. And if I had, I wouldn't have gone near him with a 10-foot pole.
Oh, a 10-foot pole. Good line, bro. Hip. Yeah, I wouldn't have touched him with a 10-foot pole. Well, you know what? This guy never met a lie he didn't love. So the concept of him attempting to distance himself from Swalwell now by saying, oh, if only I knew. If only I knew. I thought you had all the goods, Schiff. I thought you were a guy who cozied up to the intelligence community. I thought you were a guy who knew what others didn't, right? This is a guy who just straight up lied every single chance he got about Russiagate, about how Moscow was in bed with President Trump, and I've seen the evidence. Well, clearly he never did. Clearly he lied repeatedly about that. And as stated, the people of California elected him to a promotion, sent him to the Senate. So the state gets what it deserves. At the very least, that's what I used to think, by the way. I really did. I used to think that about California, New York, New Jersey, I guess now, because, I'm from New Jersey, born and raised, and I'm a voter there. And I was very disappointed when Jack Ciattarelli got defeated handily by Governor Mikey Sherrill, but it didn't really make any sense to me. Not just because the politics are bad and so many people subscribe to it and whatever, because in New Jersey, traditionally, that's been a purple state, a little bit of both. The big city Camden in the south, Newark in the north, and then other people who are sensible and actually have a job and try to make a living and try to make ends meet, they get defeated by the big lefty blocks in those big cities. But, still, that's statewide. Different districts, some are more conservative, some are more liberal, whatever. But Mikey Sherrill absolutely destroyed Jack Ciattarelli. What's that all about? Well, very simple. Fraud has been a big focus for tonight. And fraud, unfortunately, is not just stealing from taxpayers. It's stealing elections from voters as well. And the voter fraud apparatus, stealing elections, all this kind of thing. What do you want to bet? It's pretty darn robust in California. So that's really what we have to blame for Adam Schiff. But President Trump's advisor, Stephen Miller, he's one of my favorite MAGA surrogates. Might be my favorite, as a matter of fact. He's been in the fight since he was a teenager. During the Duke lacrosse rape scandal, he stood up for those guys, said this isn't right. He went to Duke and was on TV all the way back then. He's a fighter. And he's bald like me. So I have a lot of respect for those bald gentlemen that are out there on camera. But this cut courtesy of Fox News.
Adam Schiff is not only a stone cold, hopeless loser.
Yep.
But he is one of the most corrupt, one of the most shameful,
keep going,
one of the most heinous individuals ever to serve in public office in America. And everything he's devoted his life to has been debunked, discredited, and discarded.
Boom.
He literally represents the face of failure. His sole achievement in life was fighting a losing war against Donald Trump. And now President Trump is in the White House, and Adam Schiff is the leader of a dying and dethroned movement.
Yes! Bravo! Encore! Bellissimo! Stephen Miller. I mean, that is just a takedown unlike any other. Because that's what Adam Schiff really deserves, is someone telling the truth about how pathetic he is, about how pathetic the Russian collusion effort was, and how people like him, maybe he's not as bad a guy as Eric Swalwell. I honestly don't know what really happened and what didn't happen and what Adam Schiff has been up to all these years. There's rumors out there, by the way, some online stuff. Not going to get into that. But I will say this. They are birds of a feather when it comes to the idea that your money, taxpayer dollars, the 30% that you have to fork over every April 15th, right? That's their money. And they'll spend it any way they wish. All right, we're going to take a quick step aside, but when we return, let's talk Jerome Powell. Let's talk about the Catholic Church and the back and forth with Pope Leo and President Trump, because some pretty interesting revelations coming out, as a matter of fact, as to the Pope's schedule and who Pope Leo has been meeting with. And it connects to the New York Archdiocese, as a matter of fact. And we've got some audio from border czar Tom Homan, who called out the Pope despite being a Catholic. And as a non-Catholic Protestant Christian, I don't even really know what the rules are or aren't when it comes to being a Catholic and what you're allowed to say or what you're not allowed to say. But in these United States, we maintain the freedom of speech, Pope Leo. And you might remember that from a place that you used to live in, Illinois. Now you're in the Vatican, and I guess that means that you can just criticize the United States of America and criticize our autonomy and criticize our role in maintaining this earth. But you know what? That's all right. The Pope can say what he wants. We'll say what we want, and we'll do it right after this. James Flippin in for Roger Stone on the Stone Zone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
So glad that you could join us on the Stone Zone. Roger Stone has the night off. I'm James Flippin, filling in for him. And the recent back and forth with Pope Leo and President Trump. We'll get to that in a second. But President Trump is today saying that he will fire Jerome Powell if Powell stays past his out term. I know that May is when Powell's time in office runs out. Let's just see what this is all about, because I didn't really even necessarily see exactly what it was that President Trump had said. Trump has threatened to fire Powell if he doesn't step down from the position when his term is up. I mean, that would seem to be grounds for firing. Other than that, I don't really think the commander-in-chief, the POTUS, has an easy path toward canning the Federal Reserve chair. But Senate Majority Leader John Thune is urging the Trump administration to wrap up the investigation into Fed Chair Powell. Thune saying that ending the probe would clear the way for confirming President Trump's nominee to replace Powell. And we're going to watch that process obviously play itself out. But the Justice Department is investigating Powell over renovation costs at the Federal Reserve headquarters and whether or not he misled Congress. Just more of the same, really. You know, Powell's just a big government guy, thinks he's so special. He's one of these wizards that gets to control the price of money or whatever. We don't really need the Federal Reserve, by the way. But it's that's a whole different discussion. All right, so getting back into the Catholic Church and President Trump and his war of words with Pope Leo. The Pope met with David Axelrod last week. Now, David Axelrod is the guy who was President Obama's campaign architect. David Axelrod is not a Catholic, never met with a pope before. Matter of fact, his entire career is built on building the political narrative that is the American left. And yet now he meets with Pope Leo. Kind of curious, right? Well, it's really not that curious if you are paying close attention. President Trump recently said that Pope Leo's weak on crime, that he really didn't care whether or not Iran got a nuclear weapon. Then there was the AI image of Trump as Jesus. Everybody freaked out, even people on the right. Then Trump deleted it. Now, today, Trump posted a photo, an AI image of Jesus embracing him. So it seems as though our Lord and Savior has forgiven President Trump, which, of course, that's a given. But, David Axelrod, he's got some explaining to do, because why was he meeting with Pope Leo? Well, during that whole back and forth, President Trump also said, you may not have noticed, that if he had not been reelected president or elected president for a second term, that Pope Leo would not have been chosen as pope. And he's absolutely right. He is absolutely right. This is also why Cardinal Timothy Dolan was sidelined in New York as the archbishop, because Dolan and Trump get along, friends. Dolan, as an influential figure within the Catholic Church, him being friends with Trump and kind of having more of a hawkish response to immigration and stuff like that, not okay. Because apparently the key to being pope in 2026 is insisting on open borders, not really having citizenship laws, never responding to a murderous Islamic regime like Iran. You can't do any of that because that doesn't jive with Catholic doctrine. So Trump's right. They absolutely wanted a foil to him, and that's why Pope Leo was chosen. Border czar Tom Homan, who is a Catholic, he called out Pope Leo for sort of getting involved in things that he really doesn't need to get involved in. Let's take a listen to Homan.
I'm not going to speak for the president. I'm speaking for myself, a lifelong Catholic. I wish they stay out of immigration. They don't know what they're talking about. Because if they wore my shoes for 40 years and talked to a 9-year-old girl that got raped multiple times, or stood in the back of a trailer, tractor trailer with 19 dead aliens at my feet, including a 5-year-old boy that baked to death, if they understood the atrocities that happen on an open border, I think their opinion would change. And I welcome discussion with any of them because they don't understand. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. Where President Trump had the most secure border in the lifetime of this nation right now, lives are being saved. He's saving thousands of lives a year because he has a secure border. Human traffickers are out of business, right? The cartels are going bankrupt because of that secure border. I wish they'd understand that, because if they did, I think they have a different opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good point by Tom Homan, talking about the child traffickers, talking about the tractor trailer that he had to be there when they opened it and saw all these people that baked to death in the back of it. One of them, a 5-year-old boy. Anyone who actually knows anything that's ever been written, whether it's in the Bible or just interpretations of Jesus and the reason why we are Christians, right? Let the children come to me. Unless you become like children, you can't get into heaven. Lots of discussion of Jesus and his interactions with children. So you tell me, Pope Leo, why is it okay to just turn a blind eye to the threat of child trafficking, right? Because, I mean, if you don't want border security, if you don't want ICE, if you don't want Customs and Border Protection, then it's open season for those jackals, the human traffickers, and that means children. And the children of the people who have been killed in terrorist attacks as funded by Iran, how do you think they feel about the war? Do you think that they might be in the same boat as Pope Leo and saying, oh, this is just a terrible thing? Or do you think maybe they're happy to see regime change in Iran? Almost out of time here on the Stone Zone. It's been great to be with you tonight. I'm James Flippin. Roger Stone will be back soon. He's got the night off. But let's talk about Hassan Piker. Hassan Piker is a online content creator who, despite making his money here in the United States, despite being a beneficiary of all that we have in this country, he really hates America. And he was at Yale taking part in a debate, and he talked about how the American empire is dying. He also said,
the fall of the USSR was one of the greatest catastrophes of the 20th century. Just wait, listen, maybe you'll agree.
No, we won't agree, but we do know why you said that, Hassan Piker, because the fall of the USSR is a historic admission. It is an undeniable record that communism is a failure. And since communism is a guy like Hassan Piker's raison d'etre, reason to be, he has to constantly talk about what a tragic thing that was, the fall of the USSR. But the only tragedy here is that you have to pay your taxes on April 15th. I'm James Flippin. It was great to be in for Roger Stone. This is the Stone Zone.